I told my husband I wouldn't come to the wedding if his mother was there. He agreed. The wedding went according to plan until late in the evening when his mother showed up at the restaurant, took the microphone, and tried to embarrass me in front of everyone. When I first started university, I thought everything would be so serious and boring. But then our English professor appeared. Oh my God, he was amazing. That look, that smile. I just melted in every lecture, trying to sit closer to see and hear him better. You get the idea. And then Tobias came along. This guy from our group started showing interest in me from the very beginning. He kept suggesting things, grabbing coffee together, helping with homework. He was nice and attentive, but I didn't pay any attention to him. I was dreaming of someone else. Tobias noticed this and seemed even a bit irritated by it. But he didn't give up. Each time, he became more inventive and persistent. He even got our whole group together to go to the theater. I thought it would be boring, but he tried to make me laugh, joked around. It turned out to be surprisingly enjoyable. After one of our projects, I suddenly realized I was starting to look forward to our meetings. I liked him more and more. At first, it felt strange to acknowledge it, but then I thought, why not give him a chance? Sometimes life throws such surprises at you that make your head spin. Once I decided to give Tobias a chance, he seemed to sense my vulnerability and turned on the full charm. It's one thing when someone is courting you shyly and uncertainly. But with Tobias, it was different. He was so confident and persistent that I got curious about where it would all lead. At first, it was small surprises. He had a habit of giving little gifts. He started hiding small notes in my books at the library. You'd come, open a literature book, and there it is. Hope your day is as bright as your smile. Who wouldn't like that? He also started inviting me to all these university events. Exhibitions, concerts, even scientific lectures that seemed like they could be boring, but he managed to make them interesting. Once, he even convinced me to go to an astronomy lecture. We were sitting there, listening about stars and galaxies, and he whispered in my ear, "You know, in this infinite universe, I found you." How could I not melt? But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Tobias and I often argued. He had his own opinion on every issue, and sometimes our discussions got so heated that I thought, that's it, I can't take it anymore. But then he would do something sweet, and I'd forget all my complaints. In short, these weren't just months, it was a real storm of passions, laughter, and arguments. And the more time we spent together, the more I felt this wasn't just a flirtation or a short-lived crush. It was something bigger, something significant. Then came the day when Tobias decided it was time for me to meet his mother. You can imagine my anxiety. I'd heard so much about her, that she was strict, that she raised him alone, that she was his idol. In short, my nerves were on edge. We arrived at her home, and she met us at the door. A tall, slender woman with a stern look. And you know how she greeted me? She just nodded and said, "Well, come in, let's take a look at you." I nearly choked. I sat through dinner feeling like her gaze was piercing right through me. And it began. She asked me about my job, my family, my hobbies. But these weren't just questions, they felt like exam questions. Every answer I gave was met with a skeptical look or some critical remark. For instance, I told her I love reading, and she goes, "I bet you only read detective novels? You should pick up some smart books once in a while." Moreover, every time Tobias tried to change the subject or offer me some support, she immediately interrupted him and steered the conversation back to something she could use to catch me out. And when I mentioned that I help organize aid for homeless animals, she said with a sour face, "Wasting time on nonsense, you should focus on yourself instead." I felt myself boiling inside, but I kept all my emotions in check, maintaining only a smile. The most interesting part was when Tobias and I were alone, and I asked him if he noticed how she treated me. And do you know what he said? "Oh, come on, she just worries about me, she's always like that with everyone." I get it, his mom is sacred to him, but still. After that meeting, I started noticing how often he mentioned her opinion, how frequently he consulted her on any issue. And then it hit me that this wasn't going to be easy. It was going to be a challenge for our relationship. Every time we started planning something together, he would call her for advice. And every time, I felt this invisible wall between us, his mother. After that disastrous meeting, I still tried to understand why Tobias's mom was so, difficult. One day, while Tobias and I were sitting in the kitchen drinking coffee, I carefully started a conversation about his childhood. I wanted to learn more about how they lived together after his father left them. Tobias told me that after his father left, his mom had to be both mom and dad to him. She took on all the hardships, working multiple jobs to support them and provide him with an education. But this struggle left its mark on her. She became very closed off and suspicious of anyone who came near their small family. She always told Tobias, "They all want something from us, Toby. You can't trust anyone." The more Tobias talked, the more I began to understand why his mom behaved the way she did. She wasn't just protecting him, she was literally defending him from the whole world, which she believed could only harm them. Her fight for survival turned into constant vigilance and distrust of people. And this distrust, unfortunately, extended to me. When I tried to build a relationship with her, to show that I wasn't an enemy, it led nowhere. My attempts to call her or invite her shopping ended in failure. She saw me not as a helper or even just her son's girlfriend, but as a threat, another problem to be solved or protected against. Once, she fell ill while Tobias was on a business trip. I thought this was my chance to show that I could be helpful. I took care of her, brought her food, talked to her, but even in those moments when she was weak and vulnerable, her attitude didn't change. She treated me with suspicion and even contempt, as if I were trying to use her illness for my own gain. When she recovered, her words were far from grateful. "You probably think I'll change my attitude towards you now?" Those words hurt me, but I still tried not to give up. I wanted to find the key to her heart, but the more I tried, the clearer it became that it was almost impossible. And that's when I realized that my battle for a place in his life would be truly tough. Not because she was a bad person, but because she was embittered in her own way towards the world, and I would either have to accept that or, you know what I mean. After all those attempts to establish a relationship with Tobias's mom and failing miserably, I knew I needed a new plan. Tobias was still between us, like a bridge, but that bridge started to wobble under the weight of our conflicts. I tried not to pressure Tobias, but every time he said, "Mom thinks," I wanted to scream. I understood that his mom was sacred to him, but his endless deference to her opinion started to really irritate me. "You're a grown man. Cut the apron strings." Once, we were planning our vacation, dreaming of a trip to Italy. Everything was almost decided. I was already anticipating candlelit dinners by the sea, walks through the ancient streets of Rome. Then Tobias says, "I talked to Mom, and she thinks we should go to Lake Baikal. She's always dreamed of going there." That's when I snapped. I flared up, "Tobias, this is our vacation. Why should we plan it according to her wishes?" Tobias tried to calm things down, but I felt my patience had run out. "Maybe your beloved mom should tell us how to sleep too," slipped out of my mouth. He looked at me, embarrassed, as if I had suggested something unimaginable. We did go to Italy, but I think that conversation stayed in our minds for a long time. There, amidst the beauty and romance, I tried to figure out what to do next. One thing was clear to me: I couldn't keep competing for his attention with his mom. When we got back, I told Tobias that we needed to have a serious talk. We sat at the kitchen table, and I started, "Listen, I love you, and I appreciate everything you do for me, but I can't keep fighting for you with your mom. I need a partner who will stand by my side." Tobias was silent, his face showing inner conflict. "I understand how much you love her, and I will never ask you to choose between us. But I need to know that you see me as an equal part of your life, not as an accessory to your relationship with your mom." He nodded, seemingly understanding my feelings. The next day, Tobias said he talked to his mom. He explained to her that while she would always be an important part of his life, he needed to build his own life. His mom reacted ambiguously but agreed to give us more space. After all the conversations, it seemed like we finally found our balance. Tobias started to understand that while his mom is an important part of his life, I also needed my place in the sun. But as they say, every cloud has a silver lining. It all started when Tobias was offered a new job. A great opportunity, a step forward in his career. But of course, there was a catch. The job was in another city, on the other side of the country. We spent a long time discussing the move, weighing the pros and cons. Everything seemed perfect until it was time to tell his mom about our plans. Tobias was always worried about how she would take the news, as she wasn't used to letting him go far from her. When he told her about the job, at first, she tried to stay calm. But within a minute, she started expressing her discontent. She accused me of trying to take her son away, of wanting to destroy their family. Tears, screams, pleading looks, all aimed at making Tobias reconsider. And then she did something we never expected. She gave him an ultimatum: it's either me or her. Tobias looked at her, stunned, trying to understand if she was serious. The mother who had been his support all his life was now making him choose between his wife and his mother. Those words seemed to place a heavy burden on his shoulders. Tobias came home that evening like a broken man. "I don't know what to do," he confessed to me. "How can I choose between the two most important women in my life?" I understood his fears and the turmoil he was going through. But I also knew that if he gave up this opportunity for his mother, he would never forgive himself. "Tobias, you're an adult. You have the right to choose your path. Your mother needs to understand that. Is she really happy seeing you unhappy?" In the end, after many nights of talking and thinking, Tobias chose the job and the move. It wasn't easy. Telling his mother he was leaving was the hardest decision of his life. When Tobias told his mother that he had decided to leave, she simply nodded silently. Honestly, I was very relieved that we could finally live peacefully, away from his mother's overprotection. As soon as we moved, things took off: new apartment, new neighbors, new job. Tobias was all positive, and the new job really inspired him. For me, it was a bit tougher. Everything was new, and I didn't have any friends yet. But I didn't give up. I decided it was a great chance to start something new, something I hadn't done before. The first few weeks were like a blur: stress and excitement, mood swings. But gradually, we settled in. Furniture in place, curtains hung, and the house started to feel cozy. Tobias was always at work, and I took care of the house and looked for a new hobby. I even decided to sign up for cooking classes. I'd never spent much time in the kitchen before, but then I dove into it: pies, pasta, all sorts of exotic dishes. And you know what's really cool? How Tobias and I became closer. All these changes brought us together somehow. In the evenings, we often strolled through our new city, discovering cozy cafes and charming parks. On weekends, we ventured out of the city to enjoy nature. It was on one of those evenings that Tobias proposed to me. I agreed without much hesitation, but with one condition: that his mother would not be at the wedding. He thought it over and decided it was the right choice. That day was supposed to be perfect. I planned every detail of the wedding for 3 months. Every dish was carefully selected, each guest was seated according to my plan, and the venue was chosen after a long search. My hair, dress, makeup, and nails, I anticipated this day more than anything in my life. Everything was flawless, every detail in place. As the day was winding down, with all the guests tipsy, I felt like the queen of the evening, floating in happiness. But this idyllic moment was brutally shattered. Suddenly, I heard her voice through the speakers: Tobias's mother. She showed up uninvited, like a storm out of a clear sky. No gifts, no congratulations. She took the microphone and began her speech. "I'm so happy to see everyone at my son's wedding. But unfortunately, this world is unfair, and my swan ended up with an ugly duckling. This conniving creature, who forbade me from seeing my son." Every word she spoke was like a knife. She continued: "I hope your marriage doesn't last a month. I'm sure the first handsome guy will make our bride drop her skirt. But I will never forget this. From this day on, watch your back. Her words made me shake with rage and humiliation. I couldn't hold back. I started screaming at her, at everyone around who tried to stop me. That evening, which should have been the pinnacle of our love, turned into an absolute disaster. My husband, who should have been by my side, silently walked over to his mother. He blamed me for ruining everything and promised to divorce me. Now he lives with his mother. I am left alone, trying to understand what I did wrong, how everything could go so awry. How could this woman, whom he calls his mother, so cruelly destroy our life? Did love and family happiness mean nothing to him in the face of his manipulative mother?